She crushed armadas, defied popes, and made kings kneel. But when her tomb was opened, what they found was a scene of pure horror. Not a queen at peace, but a swollen body fused into lead, trapped in a coffin that looked more like a furnace of decay than a royal resting place. Elizabeth I, the pride of the English crown, was stacked on top of her own sister. And what time had done to her remains was more obscene than anything her enemies dared to do in life. But it wasn't just time. It was choice. It was political calculation. And what happened inside that tomb was never meant to be revealed. Because there's something even more disturbing than physical decay. The decay of legacy. And I'm going to show you why. If you feel like history often hides what truly matters, if you're drawn to the truths buried behind marble and monarchy, then subscribe to this channel now. We're about to hit a major milestone, and your support is what allows us to keep exposing the side of history no one else will tell. Today, what you're about to discover won't just change how you see Elizabeth Harms. It'll change how you see power itself. She ruled for over 44 years. She withstood internal plots, foreign invasions, rejected marriage, and became the absolute symbol of English sovereignty. But in the end, Elizabeth thought I was no longer a queen. She was just a woman, hidden behind drawn curtains, paralyzed by the fear of sleep. On a cold March morning in 1603, at Richmond Palace, Elizabeth stood motionless for more than 15 hours, exhausted, fragile, refusing to lie down. Her ladies-in-waiting knew what it meant. They had cushioned the floor. They were waiting. And when she finally collapsed, no one was surprised. The woman who never bowed to any man could no longer support her own body. This wasn't just the physical collapse of a monarch, it was the symbolic end of an era. Court letters describe disturbing visions, omens Elizabeth seemed to interpret as final warnings. One account speaks of a playing card pierced with a nail, mysteriously left beside her throne. Superstition? Or a message she understood all too well? We'll return to that. The face that once charmed diplomats now repelled those around her. The woman once portrayed as purity itself had blackened teeth, thinning hair, and avoided any human contact. Her physical decay was denied by all, but seen by everyone. And still, after death, they tried to protect the myth. Her chamberlady blocked any autopsy, no examination, no questions. They said it was to preserve her image as the Virgin Queen. But what exactly were they protecting? Something in her body that contradicted the legend? A detail that could unravel centuries of crafted symbolism? Her corpse was sealed in a lead coffin. The funeral, filled with public mourning and royal spectacle, displayed a lifelike effigy, crown, scepter, regal posture. But beneath that purple velvet was something else, a truth beginning to seep through the cracks of time. When Elizabeth died, the image had to live on. On April 28, 1603, London witnessed the most theatrical funeral in English memory. A wooden effigy of the Queen, dressed in royal robes, holding a scepter and crown, was placed atop a velvet-covered coffin and paraded from Whitehall to Westminster Abbey. Crowds lined rooftops, windows, and gutters. They wept not for a body, but for a legend. But that spectacle was a facade. Inside, the coffin was sealed in lead, not for grandeur, but for concealment. Lead traps odor, masks decomposition, and prevents prying eyes from knowing what truly remains. Elizabeth was not laid to rest alone. 3 years after her death, her body was moved to the tomb of her half-sister and lifelong rival, Mary Tudor, inside Henry VII's chapel. And this is where discomfort takes form. James I, her successor, ordered Elizabeth's coffin to be stacked directly on top of Mary's, a Protestant queen literally placed above a Catholic one. Two enemies in life, now trapped in the same vault. The tomb inscription only names Elizabeth. Mary is reduced to a silent shadow beneath. It was a calculated choice. Not just symbolic, but strategic. The ceremonial rigidity concealed a raw assertion of power. For over 2 centuries, the tomb remained sealed. But when you stack one heavy lead coffin on top of another for more than 260 years, what happens is no longer symbolic. And what was discovered inside that vault was not just a historical curiosity. For centuries, the shared tomb of Elizabeth and Mary was seen as a peculiar architectural choice. But what appeared to be a conciliatory gesture, a king's attempt to unite two queens divided by faith and blood, was, in truth, a calculated act of symbolic domination. James I didn't just stack their coffins. He crafted a narrative in which Mary was buried, both physically and historically, beneath the weight of Elizabeth's reign. The statue above the tomb shows Elizabeth alone, scepter in hand, crown on her head, robed in power. Mary is nowhere to be seen, not in sculpture, not in the central inscription, as if the Catholic queen had been erased, silenced beneath layers of stone and propaganda. Lead coffins were designed to seal in decay, but they also sealed in secrets. For more than 2 centuries, Elizabeth's coffin compressed Mary's beneath it. Two historical giants, one literally crushing the other in death, as if the rivalry had never ended. When the tomb was finally opened in 1869, they didn't just find dust and bones. Elizabeth's coffin, warped by pressure and time, still held the outline of a human form. That should have been impossible. After 266 years, the lead had retained the shape of the body within. Dean Arthur Stanley recorded this only in passing, with carefully chosen words, perhaps unsure how to describe what he saw, or perhaps afraid of what it truly meant. The legacy of one queen had become the literal burden of another. It was something far more physical. In the winter of 1869, Westminster Abbey became a labyrinth of stone and silence. Dean Arthur Stanley, with permission from Queen Victoria herself, launched one of the most unsettling archaeological investigations in British history. The official goal was to locate the lost tomb of James I, but what they uncovered beneath Henry VII's chapel went far beyond expectations. Opening the vault revealed 2 lead coffins, stacked like drawers in a cabinet of the dead. Stanley's description is brief, yet revealing. He notes that the upper coffin, more distinctly shaped like a human body, belonged to Elizabeth. This almost clinical observation masks a disturbing truth. The lead had collapsed and fused to the contours of her corpse, preserving the shape of a body long decomposed. Even more haunting was the smell. Stanley says nothing about it, but any modern archaeologist knows what happens when a sealed tomb is breached after centuries. Built-up gases, methane, ammonia, hydrogen sulfide, burst forth like a breath of death. Elizabeth's lead coffin, sealed for 266 years, had become a biological pressure chamber. The idea that her corpse may have ruptured from within is not exaggeration. The chemistry of decay, trapped inside thick lead walls, turns the coffin into an unstable container. There's evidence the tomb had been accessed before. Scratched into the lead was the name John Ware, dated 1645, more than 2 centuries before Stanley's official visit. Who was he? A worker? A trespasser? A looter? The truth is chilling. The tomb of one of England's most iconic monarchs may have been quietly explored or disturbed by hands history never recorded. And we may never know what they saw or what they took. Lead coffins used for royalty weren't just symbols of prestige. They were containers of silence. Hermetically sealed, they prevented odor from escaping, but also blocked the body from breathing. Over time, this airtight enclosure turned the inside into a chemical lab of decomposition. Methane, ammonia, hydrogen sulfide all built up pressure until the metal could no longer hold it. Similar cases have been documented in royal tombs. When Edward IV's vault was opened, his feet were found submerged in a dark liquid, a grim mix of bodily decay and disintegrated wood. In Elizabeth's case, the conditions were even more volatile. Her thick lead coffin, stacked atop Mary's for over 2 centuries, created a sealed chamber of weight, pressure, and irreversible collapse. These coffins weighed over 500 pounds. They required 8 pallbearers and left dents in the stone floors beneath them. The structure, molded tightly around the body, didn't allow gases to escape. Over time, the lead would begin to warp, compressing what remained. According to Stanley's notes, Elizabeth's coffin showed this exact feature, the outline of her body still visible, as if the metal had preserved a memory of flesh. But that distortion wasn't just physical. It was symbolic. It revealed that not even monarchs are immune to nature. No matter how grand the funeral, how majestic the monument, or how lasting the legacy, in the end, even a queen becomes pressure and liquid, fused not only with her sister, but with the same destiny that claims us all. Buried, pressed, forgotten. The story of royal decay doesn't end with Elizabeth. Hers is just one chapter in a larger, more unsettling tradition. The posthumous manipulation of monarchs in the name of science, curiosity, or profit. Behind the solemn appearance of royal tombs lies a pattern of quiet desecration, where kings and queens become relics, props, or scientific specimens. In the 12th century, King Henry II ordered the tomb of Edward the Confessor opened. The body was found intact: white beard, golden robes, embroidered mitre. The king's ring was taken and turned into a holy relic. In the 18th century, Mary Tudor's coffin was opened. Her long golden hair, nearly 2 feet in length, was still there. Strands were removed, not preserved. The most grotesque case may be Catherine of Valois. Her body was displayed to tourists at Westminster Abbey for nearly 300 years. Visitors paid a fee to view her corpse. Staff profited, and a royal became an exhibit. These weren't isolated incidents. They were normalized. Tombs were violated under the guise of devotion, science, or restoration, but the driving force was always possession. In 1871, Richard II's tomb was opened. Remains were taken and stored in a tobacco tin, later found in the basement of the National Portrait Gallery. This wasn't reverence. It was consumption. Even after death, Elizabeth remained a political tool. In 1975, her effigy was embellished with new jewelry, as if she still needed to project power. To this day, her image serves stories she never chose to tell. For the powerful, death doesn't end the game. It simply reshapes the board. Above the tomb where Elizabeth and Mary were stacked, James I commissioned a grand monument. White marble, solemn figures, 4 gilded lions at each corner. Elizabeth's effigy held a scepter and crown, with a calm, victorious gaze. But none of it was real. The statue wasn't built to reflect truth. It was built to sustain myth. Records from the 17th century
Have you ever
show the
wondered what
sculpture was once
secrets
vividly
lie
painted.
sealed beneath the stone floors
Elizabeth
of
wore a
ancient
crimson
cathedrals?
robe lined
What
with
becomes of
ermine,
royalty
held a
when
blue
time,
orb,
not
and had
enemies,
makeup
becomes
applied
the
to her
final
face.
conqueror?
This wasn't a portrait.
This is the chilling,
It was an
fascinating,
illusion.
and unforgettable.
A sculpted image designed to freeze her power in time, shielding the viewer from the reality buried below. The contrast between surface and depth is jarring. Polished stone above, a warped lead coffin below. A legacy of strength resting atop the collapse of the human body. Elizabeth's monument was built to project eternity. But time stripped away the color, the shine, and the fragrance. What remains is weight, and a scent that never fully disappeared. This wasn't tribute, it was strategy. The monument reaffirmed James III's legitimacy, erased religious division, and created a sense of order where there had been conflict. By burying two rivals in the same vault and naming only one, the king tried to rewrite history in stone. But marble lies. Bones do not. Deep beneath Westminster Abbey, under marble, lead, and silence, Elizabeth Thruff's still lies. Her coffin remains where it was placed, stacked atop her sister's, worn by time, compressed by its own weight. Nothing has moved since 1869. The odor has faded, but what it represented still hangs in the air. The story of the Virgin Queen, the woman who defied popes and commanded empires, ends in brutal symbolism. Not with majesty, but with decay. Not with eternal glory, but with a body fused to lead and pressed against the sister she once feared. Her tomb is not a triumph. It is a prison. In the end, the queen who refused to be a wife was made to share eternity with her greatest rival. Not by choice, but by a king who needed to display unity. There is no freedom in lead, no peace in propaganda. Only a grotesque layering of power and collapse, of myth and decomposition. And perhaps the real horror is not what was done to Elizabeth's body, but what it reveals about the living, about those who manipulate, disturb, and expose, even when the dead can no longer speak. The tomb doesn't close the story. It exposes how far we'll go to preserve a lie. The queen who once declared she had the heart and stomach of a king ended up immobilized, silent, stacked atop the woman she despised most. What this reveals isn't just the fragility of flesh, but the collapse of sovereignty itself. No scepter, no crown, no crafted image survives the weight of time. Elizabeth's coffin remains sealed, heavy, pressing down on Mary's bones, as if their rivalry never ended. Every dent in the lead, every crack in the stone, is a quiet reminder that no power is permanent. No narrative remains pure when the body itself becomes its contradiction. Westminster Abbey presents itself as a temple of glory, but beneath the marble, there is only decay, tension, and silence. The story told above is not the one that festers below, and perhaps that is Elizabeth I's final lesson. The divide between what is built to last and what truly endures. Because when all else collapses, power, image, myth, what's left are bones, stacked, pressed, forgotten, and silence. Silence always survives.